So they really want to think how they can really address the current needs of the people. And rather than thinking in a more long-term perspective, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, and many studies on climate change are always talking about what will happen in 25 years, what will happen in 50 years. It's very hard for the policymakers to understand that.
Policy change is also important in building our capacity to adapt. To manage the impact of climate change, we need to adjust our natural and human systems to reduce harm and also to exploit beneficial opportunities. These actions must be taken by individuals, households, communities, businesses and governments. Our ability to adapt is threatened because of low incomes and poor access to infrastructure, services and education. There are gaps in social and economic development in the region, gaps in governments and public finance, gaps in availability of education, health and social support, gaps in the region's ability to diversify economically at the local level. There are wide variations in the region and a significant gap with the rest of the developed world. We need to close these gaps by keeping growth strong and making development sustainable and inclusive. So the question is, what are the adaptation priorities for our region?
The problem with adaptation is that it suffers all the time from market failure. With the best intention,
We can lower that risk. These failures arise because of uncertainty. If people had more information about long-term investment plans, if they knew about the positive added value of research and other activities, then with a good collaborative framework, governments could increase the region's adaptive capacity very quickly.
But we don't have the money.
We need to do more research, but studies show that the cost of building our capacity by 2100 will cost about 0.2% of regional GDP. But the benefits could reach 1.9% of GDP, by far outweighing the original investment.
Adaptation is going to be absolutely essential. The climate will change because what we've already done in the past and what we will be doing in the future. And it will be developing countries themselves that are hit earliest and hardest. It will be developing countries themselves which have to shape their own adaptation plans and their adaptation strategies. But they have every right to look to the rich world because most of the emissions that have taken place in the past have been in the rich world. The concentrations that we see in the atmosphere now, the big majority of them come from the rich world.
If you look at the need for climate adaptation to the impacts from climate change, that's sort of integral to development. It's talking about doing development in a new way that takes account of these impacts and tries to help build resilience into the development process.
We made a decision a few years back to convert our old oil-fired plant to state-of-the-art combined cycle gas turbine technology. That reduced our carbon emissions by 2.5 million tonnes per annum, which is roughly equivalent to taking all of the cars in Singapore off the road.
We have a very clear strategy because not only do we have an environmental division within our group to consolidate all these environmental issues and activities, but we also have board members working together and having a constant dialogue on this. And I think that's really important, really, because it filters down to management and also, people who are actually working on the ground.
The energy-intensive industries are really facing this and are having trouble, frankly, coping with how they're going to adjust to the new costs. But at the same time, governments are trying to lay the groundwork for ways of softening that burden for them. That's happening in the Western countries, but it's also under great debate here in Asia.
Actually, in the old era, we know that the farmers have their own way to cope with the climate variability. They have their own system and then have their own prediction system using the natural phenomena and natural indicators to know whether the season will come or not. But now, because of the environmental degradation, and then this kind of indicators cannot be used anymore in effective way. And that's why we need to combine within the indigenous knowledge with the contemporary knowledge.
So I think, the first thing we have to do is enhance the public awareness, including the policymakers' understanding, and then try to find the simple, easy, and cheaper options which can be easily linked to their top priority agendas.
It's not just about funding. Learning from others can speed up the process. The demands on technology vary across the region. However, significant change could be brought about by neighboring countries sharing information and cooperating on joint initiatives. A good example is promoting energy trading with the different peak times across the region to lower the need for new generators in each country. Regional collaboration also promotes better policies and practices, as the information and technology shared can be of more value to more people. Although the funding levels in the region are low compared to the task, they can be used to catalyze new co-finance. Dissemination of information about funding opportunities is critical, and the region's presence in the international markets needs to grow. So the question is, how do we raise more investment and increase technology collaboration?
Well, firstly, I think people in a boardroom must understand that the world is going to move to a low-carbon future. If it doesn't happen today, it will happen tomorrow. I mean, this is the way the world is going to move. And therefore, those who are going to be ahead of the curve, who are going to position themselves and therefore should be willing to take risks, are the ones that are going to come out as winners. Those who lag behind are the ones that are going to lose market share.
We've come across businesses which have been engaged in carbon despite this not being their core business since before 2000. They've taken a huge risk and they've been very forward-looking in engaging in the carbon markets at the time that they did. And those are, unfortunately, the few and far between. Those are the rare examples. We also see a lot of companies with fantastic potential across their business assets, fantastic potential to develop carbon credit projects, but they have been a little bit reticent. They've said, we are a big business, carbon is not our core focus, why should we look at this? But I think that mindset is gradually changing. The more that they see carbon is working for perhaps the smaller players who are able to take risk, the more incentivized they will be to feel that perhaps I'm missing out on something here.
In an ideal world, you would always have the policy lead in the action. But as I said to you, we have had to make investment decisions, clearly whilst policy will be in a state of change.
I think regional collaboration is so vital because for one thing, climate change is a global phenomenon. It will not just affect one country. And in fact, the climate models are global in nature. We're trying to downscale it at the regional level.
The solution is to focus on areas we agree on, rather than to be hampered by areas where we have disagreements.
But of course, the collaboration is not only between the government, but also with the private sector. How they can allocate more funding as part of their corporate social responsibility to put on activities which is related to adaptation and mitigation. And some of the programs not really prepared in effective way, so sometimes the use of the money is not very efficient as well.
You have on the one hand developing countries saying, we want access to new clean technology, and the developed countries are saying it's right there in the marketplace. So I think the two need to come together and really focus on what are the barriers and whether it's through public-private partnerships or